thank you, ma'am. I don't even know her name, and she's so nice to me all the time to let me know that. And just as a reminder, Reb Rami will be up with us on December the 15th, also a Wednesday night. And by then, we should have made a lot more progress.
Should being the operative word.
What's that?
Should being the operative word there.
Thank you, Dan. That very kind and compassionate
Yeah.
reminder that, yeah, if we're not there, somebody shoot me metaphorically.
Yeah, right.
So I have a question. Somebody, please, or more than one person. We're not going to review everything that we are up until now, but if you could lift up one thing that Reb Rami is making points about continuously, what might that be? Carol.
That we are made in the image of God, and our job is to become in the likeness.
Beautiful. So, but image and likeness means as inscribed within, and the way that we manifest the midot, we manifest these 13 attributes.
And to see God in every person.
Oh, that's nice. There we go. Lovely. What else? So that is one thing, one major, and that is a major point. And we're doing this so that when Reb Rami's with us, we can impress him. Anybody else? What are some other major themes that actually, and I'm going to write that down because that was great. Anybody else? When I say when you're gonna, oh yeah, of course. Dan.
I think one of the main focuses is the difference between narrow mind and expanded consciousness, expanded mind, which narrow mind is our normal operation. And we need to let go of all that and return. I liken this to teshuva, to return to our simpler, original, open mind. Great.
So thank you, Dan. That was the second thing that I was going to add as well, because he, as you've been reading, he comes back to that in more different ways than I thought possible. So as a little bit of review also, we are still on, but we're going to make our way quickly to the end of the chapter on El, right? Adonai is, as Carol points out, image and likeness. El is discussing God as a creative force. And how do we spell El? Aleph Lamed. What's the, how, if we flipped El in the letters, what do we have? What word?
Lo.
Lo. We have lo, which means what, Dan?
No.
No. Okay. Years ago, when I worked at the Living Stage Theater Company, we would get in our van on Wednesday mornings and we would travel up onto 13th Street from where we were, maybe we were making our home at Arena Stage that year, but we had a lot of different spaces that we used. But every Wednesday we would go to what was called Sharp Health. And Sharp Health School was a school for physically and mentally disabled kids. Next door to Sharp Health was a school for able-bodied kids, right? And you couldn't help but when you passed in our bus, the playground, a gigantic sign on the wall, which the kids must have, played, thrown balls up against or whatever. And what the sign said in gigantic letters was the word no. It was, ever see, it said no in a circle and you got a line through it, right? So if you didn't know what no meant. And then there was a litany of things that the kids were not supposed to be doing in the playground. No spitting, no cussing, no pushing, no bossing, no, bully. Well, I don't think he said bullying. We weren't there yet those years ago, but there was at least a dozen things that were there telling the kids, low. And why am I thinking of that now? Welcome, Judy, and the people who have joined us. Why am I thinking of that now? Because low, or is no, is the opposite, and Elliot, welcome, is the opposite of creativity. If you say no, you are creating the most stringent of boundaries, which gets us all tied up in self-consciousness, anxiety, and the feeling that we are don't have much to offer to anyone. Creativity cannot grow, cannot be cultivated in such an environment. And so it makes me think, this chapter makes me think of that sign all the time. I love when Reb Rami says who we are. And welcome, Judy. So this might be a third thing. I'm going to write this down as a third thing, because I think this is also important. When Reb Rami reminds us that you are God, manifest in time and space. Right? Now, we can't be anything but that, because God is infinite and God is limitless. God is the one that was, is, and will be. It's like the number 8 turned on its side, right? So when Reb Rami is telling us that we are God manifest in time and space, it's that otherwise we wouldn't exist, right? We would, excuse me for a moment. We would be annihilated. We would be bitul hayesh, which means the annihilation of isness, right? Which is where we want to go when we meditate, but it's not how we want to be when we're driving the car, or however else we want to be accomplishing that day. So I want to go back to last week. I shared this with you. And this also is from Living Stage, was in our script, and I might have told you that as well. So this is the hardest thing there is to do. And I'm going to connect this to the Reb Zushia teaching. To be nobody but yourself in a world which is trying its best night and day to make you everybody else is to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight, and never stop fighting. So it is this fight against narrow mind and other people's narrow-mindedness. And so when Reb Zushia says on his deathbed, right, I don't want to BS, why weren't you Zushia? It's because he's concerned. He knows the reality of this, right? He knows how hard it is to go back, Dan, to what you framed as that simplicity of our neshamot, of our souls. But I would add to that the uniqueness as well. Purity, uniqueness, eternal nature. Simplicity is a lovely, lovely word to use. Okay. So narrow mind, Bob Marley sang, liberate yourself from mental slavery, right? This is also our attempt to find the spiritual tools, practices that we can live in that place of moachin de gadlut, as opposed to moachin de katlut, of expanded consciousness. Let's turn to page 14. Just review quickly this Jesus quote. This is the spiritual challenge of Jesus. Would somebody please unmute yourself and read it for us? You see it? It's near the bottom of the page.
If you bring forth that which is within you, that which is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth that which is within you, that which is within you will destroy you.
And then, thank you, Mary Rita. He goes on to say that which is within you is your unique creative face. We all have experienced times in our lives where we really, if we sink into depression, sometimes, not all the time, but if we sink into depression, sometimes it's because we're not following our muse. And I'm not talking about painting. I'm talking about that simple place that Dan lifted up before, right? When you bring out this face, that is when you see the word with spacious mind, you will see it as the manifestation of God's ongoing creativity. This is what Jesus calls the kingdom of God. And, you know, this is kind of language that I would have shrank from years and years ago, in much the same way that there was a time in my life, folks, that I would shrink from saying Hashem. I don't know if anybody relates to that, but to me, that was way too from a word. And I did not want to be associated with them, right? Until I understood what is meant by Hashem. And there's lots of other things I was hung up on too, but this is one also. Quoting from Jesus, the kingdom of God. I was in a class one time when many of you know Rabbi Deb Kolodny. Where Rabbi Deb and a class, we were taking a class together as we were making our way to Smicha, rabbinic Smicha, where she lifted up. This is called messianic consciousness, the kingdom of God, seeing that it's here now, right? Seeing that everything we're waiting for, we don't have to wait for. We have to live our lives with the practices of what we're going to get to in a few minutes of metamind, right? That he touches upon in the next chapter. All righty. One question I'm going to have for Reb Rami, and I want you to take notes as we go along, for any questions you want to raise for him, is what was his path to the deeply ecumenical manner in lens, hi Gail, through and Judy, through which he wrote this book. How did he get there? He's a rabbi, for God's sake. Well, we know that he started on the Buddhist path before he took this road, right? But Jesus, the Bhagavad Gita, I mean, there's so many, and then Abraham Alafia, you know, all mixed up in one page. Like, what got into you? When did the light bulb go off? That's what I want to hear from him, right? So, from the Hindu tradition, Arjuna, see all the universe, animate and inanimate, and whatever else you wish to see, all stands here as one in my body. Everywhere was boundless divinity containing all astonishing things. So this is almost lifting up Jesus' statement that all is one. And Jesus is lifting up, Ishayahu, Isaiah, right? All is one, right? There's nothing outside of the universe, pun intended, of God, right? All righty. So I want to stop for a second. Anything that from this chapter before we move on to the next chapter that anybody has any comments about? Linda, please.
I don't remember now if we touched on it. I like the connection to a Weeble. And part of the reason I enjoyed it is from the kid perspective. I had an aunt who was short and stout, and we used to call her Aunt Weeble because she fit the description of the way they demonstrated that toy on TV, and she loved it. She loved it. So I'm looking at page 17 and put asterisks there that his definition says it allowing chaos to be chaos without losing your sense of humor and dignity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's hard for me.
Yes. It's not just you. It's all of us, right? But that's why we practice. So when we need it, perhaps we'll be saved from being frozen by it. So in the next to last paragraph on page 17, he says, The more you learn to watch this process during meditation, the more you'll be able to watch it during the rest of your day. So that's just what I said. Watching the chaos frees you from it. Now that seems to be nonsensical in a way. Like watching the chaos frees you from it? What does he mean by that? Anybody? Yeah, Deborah.
Well, if you're watching it, you're distancing yourself from it.
Right.
And then you're free from it, as opposed to jumping into the middle of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if it's here that I was reminded of Bill Clinton. That always bothered me when I said, I feel your pain. No, no, no. Like, I hope not. You know, I recognize your pain, but I don't, like Deborah, I don't want to feel your pain. I want to be compassionate and I want to be empathetic, but I don't want to become your pain and inhabit it, but I can be with you and I can accompany you. I'm just using you because you just spoke last, right? And then he says, he answers the question I asked too. As you learn how to recognize the chaos and not be bowled over it, you can hold your seat and allow creativity to manifest in you. Creativity in this sense is your ability to engage the moment with Wu Wei. Is that how you pronounce it? Anybody know? Non-coercive action. You do not react from habit, but can meet the moment fresh, right? You do not react from habit, but meet the moment fresh. If it only was so, right? As with our mates, with our friends, with ourselves. You know, when we what did Carly Simon sing? It's coming around again. Here it is again. Am I going to act any differently? I hope so, but there's no guarantee. Right? It's like that autobiography in 5 chapters that I read during the Teshuvah, sessions that we were doing. All right. Meditation does not erase the habits of heart and mind. Rather, it allows you to see them for the habits they are, enabling you to get some distance from them in order to choose the right way to be in that moment. And as I mentioned this afternoon, I think in the meditation, I always come back to Reb Zalman of blessed memory, him talking about Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, that they're like they're like installing a new operating system. The old system remains inside, embedded. And if you hit that hyperlink, that's all going to happen, pop up, and the old habits are going to just take over because the new operating system remembers the old stuff too. All righty. Amen. To chapter 2. Let's move on to chapter 3, Rachum, which I have some questions about as we go, and I'm going to need your help to help me to understand some things that are going on he's trying to bring up in this chapter. Harvesting kindness through compassionate honesty. He's calling this fearless compassion. Fearless compassion. If we skip ahead, actually, a couple of pages to page 22, I think he gives a definition of compassion. Second paragraph, well, it's actually the first full paragraph. Somebody read it for us when it begins, when I am compassionate.
I'll read.
Who dat?
When I am compassionate toward myself and others, I am free to be fully engaged in what is happening with them and between them and myself. I can allow for all the feelings that the situation conjures, and yet I am not trapped by the feelings or the situation. I am a mirror on which the emotions of the moment play out, but when the moment passes, the mirror retains nothing. This is true compassion, reflecting all and retaining none.
Nice. That reminds me of the Bill Clinton, right? Reflecting all, retaining none. I am not trapped by the feelings of the situation. I am a mirror on which the emotions of the moment play out. This also reminded me today, as I was rereading this, of what spiritual companionship is all about, right? Of being a mashpia, a spiritual director, but I like to use the word companion. I am a mirror on which the emotions of the moment play out. And when the moment passes, the mirror retains nothing. Of course, as a mashpia, as a spiritual director, we're reflecting back to the directee, depending upon what is said to us. But we reflect and retain, but don't retain. Now, how would that play out? Anybody have an example from your life? How would that play out in a relationship with a friend or a colleague, or a partner? Or can it? Jay, please.
Yeah, for me, I mean, there's two things here. One is that this reminds me of the directions we're given in the breakthrough rooms about to be a listener, a compassionate listener. But for me, and it's also in relationship with any direction, with family, with others. There's this saying that he or she made me do this, and it's about the idea of separating an act from the reaction to that act. To be a listener, to not, and it follows right on from the last paragraph, the last chapter, on to not, to have, I'm going to try to remember what the last chapter said, but it was, for about creativity, to not, the chaos and not letting it knock you off. This is just another form of chaos when someone is angry, or someone maybe does a hurt to you, or an action, but you interpret it as a hurt. And so to be able to detach and distance from that, to listen without reacting immediately, and to listen without trying to fix, and any of those things. And it frees up the ability to perhaps at some point react with some compassionate honesty.
Yeah, thank you. Carol.
Yes. When and if someone comes to me and they've been either hurt or they have a big problem, I use my spiritual toolbox and listen to them, sacred listening, and then try to find a place where they can look for some answers and try to guide them there. Like in Musar, we have many midot in our toolbox that we can find ways to look at things, or ways to look at ourselves differently and more deeply, and help someone find their way out of it in a kind and compassionate way, but not taking it on ourselves.
Right. Thank you. Both you and Jay are lifting up, of course, the importance of listening, in the breakthrough rooms or otherwise in our relationships. And I'm reminded of, I got you, Steve, of Reb Marcia Prager, who we all pray that she will return to full health soon, in a class that I took. And I think I've mentioned this before. She was, I forget which class it was. It was a class on Jesus, I think. And but why she chose this, to demonstrate what a typical conversation looks like. So the opposite what you're talking about, Carol. Here's a typical conversation between two people. Well, I. Oh, that's really interesting, because me. Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about, because me, I. So there's none of the compassionate listening going on that both you, Carol and Jay, pointed out in that kind of interaction, but rather you're both suggesting there's an emptying, there is really a mirroring, but a compassionate. It's not like a mirror where you look into a mirror and that mirror doesn't care anything about you. By the mere act of listening is a compassionate act. That is an act of love, really. Steve, please.
this makes me think back to before I retired, when I did labor relations and had to adjudicate grievances and things like that, and issues in the workplace, where I had to listen to all the different sides or witnesses or whatever, and then make a decision, sometimes based on compassion, sometimes just based on the facts, and then be able to walk away from it without retaining really anything, and moving on to the next case or next project or whatever. And that involves sometimes terminating people and disciplining them other ways, taking corrective action. And I couldn't wear that. I just had to be like Teflon, and just after I was done, I moved on. They did what they did, they got what they got, and that's it. The facts spoke for themselves.
Yeah.
So to me, it took a lot of listening, because I had to listen to all the different sides and perspectives, but then at the end I had to make that decision.
So several examples of how we can do self-care, really, and for ourselves and care for others through listening in this way. And where's that line for that here? Oh, so he says in the next paragraph, mirror my experience, but don't embrace it as your own. Mirror my experience, but don't embrace it as your own. I mean, this is spiritual practice. To try to do this. This is hard stuff, right, Dan?
I struggle with this because it seems so much more natural to so-called feel bad for somebody. They're hurting. They've just told you something that's happened, and you feel bad for them or sad for them, as opposed to what sounds like, well, geez, that's interesting. But to feel bad for somebody, and I'm just thinking, if your child is hurt, you feel their pain too. In a sense, and that sounds to me not just natural but good. Absolutely. Not that you should be wrapped up in it and own it, but you do feel it as someone who cares for the person who was hurt.
Yes.
So I struggle with this separation.
I think it's different for a parent, right? That's a totally different situation than keep coming back to Bill Clinton. I don't think these two are the one and the same, for sure. But Deborah, before I get to you, in the case of someone who you want to feel sad for, in chaplaincy, there's the term the ministry of presence, right? And my sense is that most people just what they need is to be seen, and that's what they want. They need to be seen, and they need to be held, both metaphorically and sometimes physically as well, right? And by our mere presence says that. And so we don't have to, even if we're not pretending, if we're moved by a person's sadness, of course, that's authentic, but we don't have to feel their pain in the way that they feel their pain, because we can't.
Right.
And how many times haven't people said to everyone here, you have no idea how I feel, right? And I think that's the truth. I don't have any idea the depth of your feelings, but I can be with you. I can sit with you. I can listen to you, and I can provide the ministry of presence in that way. One more comment. Somebody had, Deborah, did you have something? And then we'll move on.
Yeah. The term that I always felt was that I was too porous. I kept absorbing everything around me, and I couldn't let it go. And several months ago, when I was in the hospital, my mushpia said to me, as I talked about the things that were going on, she said, "You're too porous. You have to learn to be semi-porous or less porous, because if you are too porous, you let everything in."
Right.
And suddenly it became a real thing, something outside of my own head.
Mm-hmm.
That made really real sense.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Page 23. Thank you, Deborah. This is something else that I thought it was useful to unpack about why so many of us won't accept, we push away at people, at God, through the actions of people. You might think that accepting God's compassion would be easy and everybody would clamor for. The opposite is often the case. There is something, this is what I underline, there's something about so many of us that wants to be blamed, that want to feel unworthy of God's love. In this way, we maintain the drama of narrow mind through a false humility. I'm trying to understand that more with more depth. What I think it means is, I'm okay. I can get through this. I don't really need, it's like that person who fails to come to be with me, or even that person comes to me, I push them away. Does this statement here, does it ring true, hollow? Is it particularly problematic at all? Then he goes on to say, in this way, we maintain the drama of narrow mind through a false humility. That keeps us here, all right? It keeps us, we don't share our hearts in that way. But I'm just wondering how this hits, anyone else. Yeah, it's Carol.
I see a great deal of fear. Fear to open up, fear to be loved, fear to believe that they're as good as they are, or that they're good as they can be. I just see a lot of fear in that.
Pardon me for always jumping to a popular
Bill
culture.
Clinton?
So when the two, I forget their names, say, well, I'm not worthy.
Wayne and Garth.
Wayne and Garth, thank you, Judy. I was looking at you. It's not the same thing, obviously, but in a way, I wonder whether they're being satirical, about that we feel we're not worthy of what anyone wants to give over to us. That perhaps we in our fear, Carol, of receiving, maybe there's the fear of then having to reciprocate.
A fear of having to open up and have people see who we are.
Absolutely, that's right. To show ourselves for who we are. And I don't about you. I mean, for a long time, had a lot of difficulty receiving. I felt that I was a giving, fine. But don't try to give me anything. I've changed, but I think there are a lot of people who fall into that category who they're good, they're givers, but what's in Hannah Teferet Siegel, she sings giving and receiving, we open up our hands, right? Dan.
I think it is, it certainly makes sense to me, this feeling unworthy. And I think part of that has to do with the parenting that we've received, in terms of being judged, never being good enough, always trying to earn our parents' praise or acceptance or whatever it is. And so I think it can be related to that. I don't know that it's, that's a whole different psychological thing than the self-aggrandizement or false humility. It's more really feeling unworthy. I am not good enough. I don't deserve X, Y, and Z. So I think there is a realness in that, but it may be different from what he's referring to.
Well, I think in the end, he's referring to narrow mind, moachin dekatnut, which is the place of fear and the place where creativity cannot thrive. And that we continue to see ourselves through the narrow lens of who we were. Years and years and years ago, I had a therapist who kept on reminding us that it was a group therapy thing, that we were all still children in the land of the giants. right? That we still see ourselves as we were when we were kids. And it reminded me of that, Dan, by what you just said. Mary Rita.
So this keeps on staying in my mind, and it is that Rami is the one that wrote the words to I am loved by an unending love,
Mhm.
and that the verses of that, and many of the verses, kind of balance out that truth that we are loved by an unending love. And the verses give examples, I think, of those, that how we could really, in our action, feel unworthy of that love.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's interesting. He says this, what you just said to describe, you're saying in effect, while others may be beloved by God, I am different from them. My sins are greater than theirs. And he calls this isn't humility, this is narcissism. But I want to also point out too, and thank you, Mary Rita, about Reb Rami's lyrics, which later, of course, Shir Yaakov put to music. Remember that when we say Shema, right, we're going into that state of Moachin de Gadlut. As a matter of fact, there is a Hasidic practice that through Shema, you imagine, well, more than imagine, you're on that escalator, which of course we're in 21st century. Yaakov saw it as a ladder, a sulam. We're on our path upwards. And at the end of the Shema, we're on the highest of the high, right? We are atzilut, which of course means nearness to. It doesn't mean at that place. It means nearness to, because if we were at that place, we'd again be obliterated. We're that nearest to, and then on the dalet of echad, I'm sure you've heard people, and maybe it's one of your practices. You hit the dalet, so extending echad. And what the dalet does, and remember, dalet is what number in Gematria is 4. So we've ascended through the 4 worlds, all the way from Asiya to Yetzirah to Bria to Atzilut. We're right there, and divinity is extending her arms to us. And then you hit the dalet, and it's like the elevator goes right back down to, but not all the way down, right? Back to the first floor. Because this is where I need to live. I can't live in Atzilut. I have to live in the combination of all of these 4 worlds together. So why is that there? Before Shema, we've acknowledged Ahava Rabbah, just that you are loved by an unending love. What happens immediately after Echad? V'ahavta et anadecha. It's not a tzivui, it's not a command to love your God. It is the result of visiting that place, right? Of the highest of the high. Once you're there in that kind of expanded consciousness, this is where Reb Rami is coming from, right? Once you're there, then love, then all you need is love, right? And love guides and dictates. It's called the sacred art of loving kindness, right? And all of the midot are portals through which to practice it. And you can choose one, or you can embody all. Right? Okay, that's my rabbi sermon for the night. With a Shema sandwich. Next time you chant the Shema, be mindful of your journey to get there, right? So if we're doing you are loved by an unending love, pay attention to what you're saying and allow the words to soften your heart, allow the words to open your eyes, allow the words to remind you of the truth of all of that, so that when we get to blessed are you who chooses, or mikarev, who brings us closer, whichever word we're using, be'ahava, in love, to you in love. It not only makes a lot more sense, but it feels a lot better too. It's a really sweet, it sweetens the experience. All righty, metta practice, which he spends a lot of time on. I'm really fascinated, and part of me wants to do this, which is find photographs of myself at these various ages. Because this is what we were just talking about. And Dan, you reminded us about this is all leftover crap, from childhood. So what does it mean to, he's in the middle of page 27. And he says, I do this version of metta on special occasions, such as my birthday. Oh, maybe I'll do it next week. Or at times when I'm feeling truly stuck or lost. I begin with a photo of myself when I was 6, knowing that this child still resides in me, bringing with him both playfulness and foolishness. I want to make peace with this inner child. I say to the inner child through the photograph, may you be free from fear. May you be free from compulsion. May you be blessed with love. May you be blessed with peace. Right. This practice at various times, what does he do? It he says is at 6, then a picture in his 20s, and then at different stages in his life. Right. All intended to free us, to liberate us. And I'm wondering out loud whether there's a hint at what being saved is. Yeshua, Ana Adonai, Hoshiana. Please God, save us. I'm just wondering out loud. Carol, please.
St. Francis prayer, the last line always had me kind of stuck, where it says, it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I've come to discover in my own self that means like every day is a new beginning. Every day I can start over. Every day I can be the Carol that I want to be, an instrument of your peace and everything that's written there. That's my interpretation of that.
Absolutely. It's being born again.
Exactly.
In every moment. We say every day, right? In the great mystery, in God's goodness, God recreates. Every time we sing "Morning Has Broken," I think of that the use of the language in that song. It's God's recreation of the new day, right? But it could also say recreation, as if this is God's, sandbox. And I understand it in both ways, right? Because God's not recreating yesterday, but recreating the setting on which we, Shakespearean actors here play our lives. Jay.
You have the poem for the Emerson quotes from today's meditation.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to use that. Thank you for reminding me. Before we move on to the next chapter, which is pretty soon, don't let me go get there, Jay, until you remind me again, because I had it right here to read. Fabulous. So this prayer of St. Francis, I put to music, and I use it at the beginning of the very first session of every Multi-Faith Storytelling Institute class, a new beginning of that class. So we're on page 28, and you'll be able to sing along with me. This isn't the exact way that I sing it with these words, but I'll try to remember. Make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow your love. Where there is injury, let me bring pardon. Where there is doubt, let me bring faith. Make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's despair, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, let me bring light. Where there is sadness, let me bring joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, that I may not so much seek to be understood as to understand, but to be loved as to love. Make me an instrument of your peace, for it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and in dying, born to eternal life. Make me an instrument of your peace. Make me a clay kodesh, right? Make me an instrument for all that is good and all that needs to be manifested of you through me. And I sense that that is another theme of Reb Rami's, right? That we are clay kodesh, right? I'm going to make that note too. And we have to understand that there's a certain things that we've been listing, and I'll go list them again. We're made in the image of likeness of God, that we live bouncing back and forth, shov, between small-minded and expanded consciousness, that we are God, you are God in time, expanded in time and space, and that we're Klei Kodesh. So all of these themes are continually reappearing. And these are the themes I think that he's asking us to consider in our spiritual practices, to remember these things, to put these things back together again. Jay, you're supposed to remind me something. Did Jay get bounced? No,
I didn't know
he-
you were at a pause, but
Yeah,
I was actually looking for a photo that I have by my desk,
Yeah.
which is me in first grade under the jungle gym. And I don't know if you could see that. And I don't know if it's a metaphor or something, but it's a little Polaroid that I keep, and my sister having a great time not paying attention to the cage that we're in.
Yeah, we do that, don't we? I'm going to screen share this Emerson quote that I used today for a meditation. Thanks for reminding me, Jay. Emerson said, "Write it on your heart that every day is the best day in the year. He, she, is rich who owns the day, and no one owns the day who allows it to be invaded with fret and anxiety. Finish every day and be done with it. You've done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow's a new day. Begin it well and serenely, with too high a spirit to be cumbered with your old nonsense. This new day is too dear, with its hopes and invitations, to waste a moment on the yesterdays." It's kind of like a Shema V'Mita and Modeh Ani all wrapped up in one quote. You know, the blessing we say before going to bed, which is releasing us, right, from that day's tsuris, the problems and mishaps and omissions, commissions, errors, you know, and the next day that is coming. And it kind of connects us in a way.
Apparently that was written in a letter to his daughter.
Thank you, Jay. Well, how did you find that out?
There's this thing called the interwebs. It's a series of tubes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All righty. We are moving into chapter 5. Wow. Look how fast we're going tonight. Ooh, I like that. Cages or wings? Which do you prefer? Ask the birds. Thank you, Jonathan Larson. Nice. You have the cartoon there? Maybe you can screen, is it, if it's on, you
No,
can.
no, Jonathan Larson.
Oh, Jonathan Larson, that's Rent.
No, it's his other show, Tick Tick Boom.
Oh,
His
wow.
own personal journey. Anyway, we don't need to go down that path, but this is like at the climax of his personal story of trying to find his way as a musical theater
Mhm.
writer. And yeah,
Beautiful.
but
beautiful.
that's when Jay was talking about being under the, that's what came to mind.
Yeah. But our, and our spirits are so indomitable, that's a word, isn't it? That what Maya Angelou says, I know why the caged bird sings, right? Even though we are entrapped by all of this and narrow mind, when we sing, we are flying and we're limitless, right? We're unbounded. That's the quotes like this are like they're endless. What is it? George Jackson in Soledad Brother says, trapped in jail, within a jail, my mind is still free. Trapped in jail, within a jail, right? There's your cage. My mind is still free. I love where, you can point to things that are not from the quote unquote sacred text realm, but points to the same exact things that we're talking about tonight. All righty, my friends, chapter 5. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum. Rachum.
What about chapter 4?
What's chapter 4?
Grace.
Grace.
Oh, I mislabeled it. I mislabeled it. This is chapter 4. I put down chapter 5. How could I leave out a 4? 4-letter name of God. All right, chapter 4, grace, Hanun. Before we jump into this, can we get a quote unquote, I was going to say non-Jewish, or what is a classically Christian understanding of grace? Anybody know? Mary Rita, I was hoping you were going to raise your hand.
Grace is being in the flow of God, and it's given freely. It's not owned, it's given freely.
It's just like an unearned, like we have credits stored up that we didn't earn ourselves. And despite the fact that it's nothing that we did except for be born, we are deserving of.
We're deserving of it, yes.
By the grace of God go I.
Yes.
Although I think, Rami, does he say that later on? Does he quote that? I seem to remember, right? He says the most important word in that line is I, which brings us back to Moaching to Katnu, narrow-mindedness. But but that's
bottom of 32. Bottom of 32.
Oh, thank you, Dad. Yeah. It's more about I than God, right? Right, because we live in that place of, Moaching to Katnu most of the time. But thank you, Mary Rita, this idea of chen and grace. Deborah.
But in Christianity, isn't it tinged with a sense that people are unworthy, but they're getting grace anyway? They're receiving grace anyway, but they are sinners. Isn't that sort of the other side of it?
Depends on what you follow, because original sin only came in because they wanted to baptize infants, and they had to find a reason to baptize infants. So they came up with this idea of original sin. But in the beginning of Christianity, people were deserving of grace. It wasn't until later, and probably they'll blame it on St. Augustine. I don't remember which one. But there is that sense of, we need Matthew Fox because he talks about original blessing. And there was, in the beginning of Christianity, the belief of original blessing. So you're right. In some ways, when you when I read the books that I've been reading for the deep ecumenism class, it seems that we in our Jewish tradition are more open to grace than very, very often Christians are, but Christians claim it much
And
more
yes, and
readily.
yet we don't like, well, if I say like, we don't often use that word,
Right.
right? We don't use that.
Rami wrote a book about that too. And
Ah,
he uses Hesed for grace when he wrote that book.
nice. Write that down. Ask him about that.
I
his use
will.
of the word grace. So, but we sing about it all the time. Sim shalom tova uvracha chen.
Vachesed.
Right. Vachesed varachamim. Right. Bring peace. And why is it in Sim Shalom? Why is why all of those midot mentioned is because shalom is shlemut, right? Peace. It's really a fullness of life itself, of completeness, right? Of some that shlemut. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the. How do I finish the sentence? Peace is the peace is not the PIECE, but it might be greater than the sum of its PIECES, right? Did that make sense? Meira. No, Tan, thank you for being honest. Meira.
Okay, so I just looked up on the computer that according to Christian theology, grace is the spontaneous, unmerited gift of the divine favor in the salvation of sinners and the divine influence operating in individuals for their regeneration and sanctification. And that's from Britannica.com.
Great. So we can see that through a Christian lens or a Jewish lens. I mean, we fess up to errors, to our sins. And so a grace, there's an understanding of Yom Kippur that we are all cleansed. You don't even have to go to shul. Don't tell anybody, but right. We don't even have to go to shul. We don't have to say those prayers. We don't even have to say, Shechatanu lefanecha, because the day itself. So I'm wondering now whether or not that is a form of divine grace, at its utmost. That there's a day in which we are saved from ourselves. Gail, please.
Yeah, I went on Christianity.com, and what I like here is grace is the love of God shown to the unlovely, the peace of God given to the restless, the unmerited favor of God.
Yeah, so that keeps coming up, the unmerited favor, right?
Right. God's favor towards the unworthy, God's benevolence on the undeserving. In his grace, God is willing to forgive and bless us despite the fact that we fall short of living righteously.
Right. So with the top of okay, sorry, Linda.
Please comment.
Linda?
So the question's going to sound like a joke, and I don't know if I should be half joking while I ask it. What is the Jewish version of a priest telling a confessor to say 5 Hail Marys and that absolves them from their sin? Because they go to confession. However many, apparently there was this numbered structure, say 5 Hail Marys and you're done, like it's all over. So is there a Jewish equivalent to that? Because the conversation seems to be leading to it.
But that would go back to the 1950s. That would never be the way that the sacrament of reconciliation is understood today. The Jewish version would be go out and do acts of loving kindness or do a mitzvot, do some action that would help you to, in a sense, live in a sense of grace again.
And have a belief in the 13 attributes.
Yeah.
Which seems to be absent in the Christian view of God.
Not really.
Well, the way we use it.
Well, this reminds me that we need to have a series of classes on Christian theology.
But it depends on what Christian theology.
Absolutely right.
Yes, because Catholicism is different in some ways that it explains other things. I personally love Rami Shapiro's definition of grace.
Go ahead, because I was just going to raise that up. What is it?
God's unlimited, unconditional, unconditioned, and all-inclusive love for all creation. It's page IX page 9 in Amazing Grace, Living a Grace-Filled Judaism.
Nice. Nice.
And Sheffa quotes it, and I think it's in when she's doing the teaching on Matovu. I think that is the chant that she quotes that. I'm not sure.
What is the difference between grace and Shekhinah? Shekhinah is sort of the presence of God in the world, but it's not grace. It's not chen.
No, it's spelled differently. Chen is, Elliot's laughing. It's spelled differently. That answers the question.
No, I mean, the whole idea of Shekhinah. No, I understand it's not the same word in Hebrew. One's with a chet and one's with a chaf. Right. But the concept, even Kabbalistic concept of Shekhinah, of God's presence, how is that different from the concept of God's love?
That's
Well,
I don't know that I'm capable of tackling that at this moment.
Okay. All right.
But we can ask Rami when he comes.
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
But to go back to somebody's question about how is, I think, Linda, what would the rabbi say, right? If a person comes to the rabbi and says, you know, I've done this and that, and the rabbi's not going to say 10 Hail Marys.
Yeah, we have to work at that. Where Catholics don't. They just say, I did something wrong. And they don't have to they don't have to atone. They don't have to make amends. They don't have to even consider.
That's not true.
On the surface.
But they have to still have to.
I grew up with Italian girls who said, you know, I kissed a boy under the boardwalk. The priest said, you're absolved because you said 5 Hail Marys. I mean, it never went beyond it. Their thinking from here never made it to here. Now, granted, it's a girl's version because we were teenagers, but it seems so superficial to me.
Okay, I don't want to get
no, that's all right.
Wrapped up in this, but before we're finished, maybe we'll all sing Under the Boardwalk together. Thank you for raising up that definition of grace, Mary Rita. And who is the character who he points to as the model for grace in order to understand what it means and how it's manifested and where he's going with it? Of course, it's Eov, it's Job, right? Where he's had the kitchen sink thrown at him, right? And where another person would spend their time blaming others. It takes a while, and he doesn't do that, although his friends want him to do it. But at the top, page 33, what Job discovers is that the world is simply the world. The human ideas of justice and fairness have nothing to do with it. That God is the wild whirlwind spinning out a wild drama of order and chaos without you in mind at all. God's grace is in spinning the drama. Your grace is in learning to engage it without being blown away by it. And then he says, grace is to life as current is to ocean. Grace is the dynamic nature of things. And I think you touched on that, Mary Rita, either when you were talking on your own or whether you were quoting Rami on this. Going empty into God, the fourth paragraph, is the key to finding and embodying grace. So again, you can't bring the mishigas because then we're going to have excuses and then we're going to blame others, right? And then we're not going to see ourselves against this great backdrop of the drama that is life and our part in it, right? And then he illustrates that, right? Of bringing too much of ourselves, of our history, of our patterns, of our habit, of our story into life, and then being weighed down by it. And this wonderful, I don't know if you chuckled or you got as much delight out of the story about no carrying on Shabbos. Yeah, Carol, you like that? I love that. Everybody's read it, but I think it's worth reading it again. So where he passes a rabbi in the sidewalk, he's going to his dining hall on his a Kabbalistic kibbutz. I don't even know where that is. And he has a bunch of books, and he says, "No carrying on Shabbos." He thinks he's talking about his books, right? But so Rami answers from a very tachlis, very what's tachlis mean? Very down to earth, right? Answers. He thinks the rabbi's talking about his books. He shouldn't be carrying books because we're in an area that shouldn't be carrying things on Shabbat. But Rami thinks, oh, wait a second, there's an eruv. There's a container within this property in which I'm allowed to do that on Shabbos. And he says, oh yeah, we have an eruv, but no carrying on Shabbos. He says it to a number of times. Drop it. I'm not carrying anything. Drop it. Right. And he says, you got too much going on up here. You're carrying all this stuff into Shabbos. Living in harmony with spacious mind is living without fear, and thus without anger, greed, and worry. It is living in grace. So again, he is offering the understanding that the spiritual practices that we do that bring us into expanded consciousness, mochin de gadlut, spacious mind, free us from ourselves, our stories, our burdens. It is, and then we can begin to look in grace and confront life in the moment, right? And then he goes into Shabbos, which we're going to save for next week, because there's nothing as delicious as talking about Shabbat, which, of course, is the day not of human doing, the day of human being, right? And that, he makes the point, is the new covenant. And I love this quote from Yirmiyahu on the bottom of page 34, especially the part where it says, the days are coming, and this new covenant, which I will be different than I made with your ancestors, that I will place my Torah in you, right? Which happens over and over and over again. It's happening right now. Then I will be your God, you will be my child. We will be more fully in relationship. I will write my teaching on your heart. I will inscribe it on the doorposts, which is right here. Right? Then you will no longer need teachers and sages urging you to know me, for you shall know me naturally. That's what I was saying before about Shema, right? The Shema will bring me there too. You will know me naturally. And then I will forgive you all your errors and let fade all memory of your wickedness. The slate get wiped clean. In the same way that Emerson is inviting us into that same place. Yesterday was yesterday, today is today. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. I think that's a song from somewhere, Judy, isn't it? Let it go.
Frozen.
Thank you. That's right. Let it go. Okay. One more thing before we call in tonight. We'll come in for a landing with us. We're page 35 in the next to last paragraph. Those who tried to hoard manna on other days, right, found the leftovers rotted and maggot filled. The grace is knowing that everything we need will be provided for. What we need, not what we want, what we need. You could share what you have, but you could not cling to what you have. This is the key to grace. This is the key to grace. Each day, God provides you with exactly what you need for that day. If you take of it freely and embody it fully, then all is well. If you seek more than you can eat in hopes of stockpiling it, it rots. Today is for today only. And then again, Jesus. Don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or what you will drink, not about your body, what you'll wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds in the air. They have a lesson to teach you, right? They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. And are you not of more value than they are? Can you worry, add a single hour to your span of life? Don't worry, be happy. Right? Don't worry, Ivdu Hashem b'simcha. Everything will take care of itself is what these teachers are leading us to, that well, right? I feel a song coming on, but I don't know what it is. That's very unusual for me.
I thought it was Under the Boardwalk.
Oh, right.
It was Amazing Grace.
Oh, very good. We'll do both. On the street you can hear the happy tune of the carousel. You can almost taste those French fries and hot dogs they sell. Under the boardwalk, down by the sea. Oh yeah, on a blanket with my baby is where I'll be. Under the boardwalk, out of the sun, under the boardwalk, we'll be having some fun under the boardwalk. People walking above under the boardwalk. We'll be falling in love under the boardwalk. Boardwalk. Oh, I don't want to sing Amazing Grace. I don't really want to end with Save the Wretch Like Me.
Okay. How about something by Grace Slick?
You can always sing A Soul Like Me.
Ah.
Yeah.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. It's Moachin, God looked for you and me. Thank you all so much for your holy presence this evening. Gonna